Welcome in. What's Right with Nick Wright, episode 313. Programming note, Demonze, for I think the first time in the history of the pod, out sick today. I talked to him this morning. He was going to fight through and come in. I said, take your day. So wish the best to Demonze, but a hell of an Iron Man streak for him of not missing any time. And so he's out today, so it'll be just me, which, should definitely, as always promised, lead to a quicker show because he's the one that always does the over-talking and explaining and non-sequiturs and different various rants where you interrupt yourself. I've told him he's got to stop talking so much. So we'll get right to it. Here is what missed the cut in today's show. And the first thing that missed the cut, didn't miss the cut at all. Bronny James, 39-7, 4-4. For the South Bay Lakers last night against Santa Cruz. He was a plus 19 in his 38 minutes. It was far and away his best game at the professional level. And this is where I will, as I have, remind everyone that 20 months ago, July 25th or 24th of 2023, this kid suffered cardiac arrest. It totally derailed his collegiate season, and that is evidenced by the fact that he has now had 10 professional games, 1 at the NBA level and 9 at the G League level, that are better than anything he ever did in college. And so when people pointed out like, oh my God, look at his college stat line and that's a player that you're drafting, there had to be some math done on, yes, his collegiate numbers were that of a player that typically would not be drafted even late in the second round. But if you throw the season away and say those numbers were due to the fact that he never got his legs or his wind underneath him because of the months he had to stay away from the court because they thought he might not be able to play basketball ever again due to a congenital heart defect, then maybe, just maybe, you saw some traits that could be a successful player. And Kevin O'Connor, who knows a hell of a lot more about the draft and about college basketball than I do, tweeted to me this morning that if they did a redraft today, he thought Bronny would be a first-round pick, and that if Bronny can keep up this shooting, then he's a legitimate NBA player. And again, I am not trying to make too much of the G League, which is something we never talked about previously. However, because Bronny is a star and because he has been the subject of scrutiny, we have to be fair in that the expectation was that in the G League, with grown men, with a lot of guys who were former first-round picks trying to make a career for themselves, with a lot of guys who had a lot more experience than him, with a lot of guys who were much more highly drafted than him, that he was going to, certainly in his first year in the G League, really have his work cut out for him. Now, and more than his work cut out for him, potentially really struggle. And instead, he now, after not playing well in Summer League and not playing well in the G League's kind of preseason, I don't know, tip-off tournament or whatever they call it, in the G League regular season, he is now averaging 22, 5-5 on 46, 38, 80 splits. That is a great value for your 55th overall pick, and shout out and credit to Bronny. And so we're not going to spend more time on that, but that was in what missed the cut, but it didn't actually miss the cut. We did a nice few minutes on it. Also, SVP, my guy, after Maryland finally gets on the right side of a buzzer beater, tweets, he's a diehard Terrapin fan, and he tweets out, never a doubt, as a wise man says. Shout out Scott, Van Pelt, Ernie Johnson, Kevin Wildes, the only 3 people in sports media with 100% approval ratings, and very nice of Scott to include, obviously my trademark tattooed, came up with first person ever use it phrase, never a doubt. Very nice of him to use that in celebrating an all-time Maryland moment. More on the tournament in a second. And I guess that is one way to put it. I did invite myself on the Kelsey's pod. The Kelsey's tweeted, should we have an NFL salary cap expert on the show? And I just responded, I got you. That way it can be, because obviously I'm a salary cap expert, but also we could talk other things, and it would be interesting. Because, Eagles fans tend not to like me that much, but Jason, I would imagine, does. I don't know. But if we could get a What's Right with Nick Wright New Heights crossover, that would have to be good for the burgeoning What's Right brand, which, by the way, YouTube's like, rate, subscribe, review on all platforms. YouTube just crossed 190,000, so we appreciate you guys for that. The slow climb towards 200,000 continues, but also we'd really like you guys to subscribe on either iTunes or Spotify, wherever you guys get your podcasts. All right, so we have to lead this morning with just a huge bummer, which is a young woman who I truly, and I said this last year, I think, and I'm not going to use past tense, but I had said this in the past, and I still believe it, has a chance to be the greatest women's basketball player ever. I truly believe that. I believe that. When everyone was talking about, and I obviously was a huge part of the talk as well, about the phenomenon that is Caitlin Clark, I think you guys heard me say a couple times on the show that I thought JuJu Watkins at USC might end up being even better than Caitlin and even better than everybody. Her size, her athleticism, her basketball IQ, it is elite of the elite, and a player that can do everything, a player that recently put up a stat line that had not been put up in men's or women's professional or college basketball this century, when I think she had 38 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 8 blocks in, again, a 40-minute college game. She tore her ACL last night. And it's just devastating for a bunch of reasons. It puts it, I would imagine, on the board that she doesn't play college basketball again. Now, I would think she does. I would think that the plan is for her to miss all of next season and then come back for what would be her senior year, or I guess redshirt junior year, and continue to play. And with NIL and the WNBA salary structure, I would have to imagine JuJu can potentially make far more money at USC than she would at the beginning of her WNBA career, unless something drastically changes with the rookie salary scale there. But this is just an ultimate bummer, because we got in the Final Four last year Paige versus Caitlin, and we were basically assured that we were going to get Paige versus JuJu in the Elite Eight. And I talked about how I didn't love that they put USC and UConn in the same region, because that felt like it should be a Final Four or a national championship potential matchup, and it ends up that it's going to be. And USC should still they should be able to win next round without JuJu, but not past that. They absolutely can't beat UConn without JuJu. And you just feel sick for this young lady who has the real potential to be a true superstar, a true crossover, not just great player. She's obviously going to be, she already is a great player, and a torn ACL, is not career altering the way it once was, but she needs a great NCAA tournament run just to catapult her celebrity, the way Caitlin had, and the way, honestly, Angel Reese, who, no disrespect to Angel Reese, but Angel Reese is not nearly the caliber of player of Caitlin or of JuJu or of Paige for that matter. And they have all had these great tournament runs. JuJu, this was going to be that this year, and if not this year, next year. And now out for, I would imagine, all of next season, which is just such an absolute bummer. And here is the thing about ACLs the way I have seen them over the last decade. ACLs are different in that they used to truly be career-altering. And these days, they are not, meaning people typically come back 100% to their pre-ACL tear ability, strength, speed, quickness, all of that. But they are not quick injuries. It usually is a minimum of a calendar year that you are out, and usually a little more than that until you look like your old self. So a huge bummer. This is, put this in the huge story, not a great topic category. And I mean, that's kind of what it is. There's not much to say. It's massive news, but it just sucks. There's no real take to have. And so JuJu Watkins out, and I have to, UConn's now, I'm going to look it up on DraftKings. I just can't, maybe you guys can put in the doc for me. I mean, I know they're the favorite, but I just wonder what they are now. Is UConn women to win that region? To win the region, I have to imagine they are minus huge money. I'm not able to pull it up right now. If you guys can throw it in the doc whenever you can find it, just put what they are to win the championship and what they are to win the region, because I do not see who possibly could stop them. Certainly. Now, listen, UCLA, South Carolina, those are legitimate championship level teams, but UConn's in the Final Four, and they're now plus 160 to win the whole thing. We can't find them to win the region, but it's not going to be, it's not going to be much of a question. I had the privilege of watching the UConn women in person from courtside seats, thanks to Fox. The game was on Fox beginning of the year, and I left that game saying, I don't know how anyone's beating them. Now, UCLA and South Carolina is obviously a juggernaut, and USC had shown, oh no, they're of that caliber, and UConn lost a few times, but I feel like you can put probably in pen a UConn UCLA Final Four on your left side of the bracket. And thoughts with JuJu. It absolutely sucks. Just absolutely sucks that she's done for the year and potentially done for next year. One note, and I'm sure this will happen because Paige is such an awesome athlete and awesome person from all accounts. Paige dealt with an ACL and missed a year. And so I would imagine if she has not already, Paige is going to reach out to JuJu and try to help her through it. But really, really sucks for basketball fans, for USC fans, for JuJu. All right, to the men's side of the tournament. So there's a lot of different things I want to hit here before we get to the Lakers losing streak, the Rodgers stuff. We'll get all to that later. But our college basketball coverage on this show burns hot, bright, and fast. Like the rest of the country, we have somewhat of a tepid interest in it. I shouldn't say everyone's like this, but at least for me, a tepid interest in it throughout its regular season, and then are living and dying with the tournament and the storylines come March. So I am not going to act like I am Mark Titus or Big Cat or John Fanta or John Rothstein, the people who are, who know all of these teams in and out. I do not. However, I do watch the tournament nonstop for, 12 consecutive hours, 4 consecutive days, and you feel like that plus a passive interest throughout the year, you have a good feel on things. And the people who had been watching all year, who said Duke's way better than everybody, they appear to obviously be correct. Now, you might be like, Nick, didn't you pick Tennessee to win it all? I did, because upsets happen, and that's a fun one, and I think Tennessee is really, really good. But right now, there are 7 guys left in the tournament. 7 left in the entire tournament that are consensus first-round picks, meaning guys that are high enough picks that they are included in every mock draft you find out there. These 7 guys are in all of them. Duke's got 3. The rest of the tournament has 4. Now, again, there's 3 or 4 other guys in the tournament that might end up being first-round picks. Maybe even 4 or 5 others. But there's 7 players right now in the NCAA tournament that are what you would consider minus huge money to be first-round picks. And Duke has 3. There are 5 guys that are currently projected lottery picks left in the tournament. And Duke has 3. Now, that doesn't guarantee you anything, but it does give you an idea of what a talent edge this team currently has and why it would be absolutely, at least to me, shocking if they do not make the Final Four. Now, in the Final Four, coming out of the region beneath them on your bracket, will either be Houston, Kentucky, or Tennessee. And any of those 3 teams could beat them. And you guys know, I'm picking Tennessee. I like the odds on it. And I think they have part of that, if I'm being totally honest, probably has to be that a disproportionate amount of the college basketball regular season and conference tournament games that I watched involved Tennessee, because we have a close friend that's a big Tennessee Volunteer fan, so we watched some games with her. And so I thought this team had high upside, but bake that in to my analysis of this. But Duke is obviously the most talented team in the country, and Cooper Flagg is as advertised. Now, I do find the Cooper Flagg hype is the wrong word, but because hype almost sounds like unwarranted. But I am curious, take the temperature of what are fair Cooper Flagg expectations when it comes to how he stacks up amongst number 1 picks. So if we just go the last decade, right? I think that, so the number 1 picks the last decade are Karl Anthony Towns, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, DeAndre Ayton, Zion, Anthony Edwards, Cade, Paolo, Wemby, Reece Shea. If you were to rank them based on NBA, you can't really rank based on NBA career because there's, Karl's played a decade, Wemby's played a year. But I think you would probably slot them, like if you did a draft of number 1 picks, Wemby would go 1, again, the last decade. Ant would go 2, Towns 3, Cade 4, and then Zion, Paolo 5, 6. When I watch Cooper Flagg, I put him right ahead of Paolo and right behind Zion when it comes to potential coming out of school. Now again, if you were redrafting based on hype or expectation, it would have been Wemby 1, Zion 2, Karl Anthony Towns 3, but we've now seen Zion didn't quite live up to it. When I hear some of the draft experts talk, they go further back And they say basically number one picks the last 20 years, basically number one picks post LeBron, that they have Cooper, that it's Wemby 1, Anthony Davis 2, and they would have Cooper Flagg 3. Ahead of everyone I just mentioned, plus Kyrie and Dwight and Blake, D Rose, all those guys. That strikes me as ambitious. Now, again, as I've said now for the 6th time on this show, I am not a college basketball expert the way some are, but it felt to me like the absolute Anthony Davis was such a overwhelming, obvious number one pick, franchise changer, the likes of which, again, LeBron's in his own category, we hadn't seen in, the 4 or 5 years prior to him or after him. Wemby took that up to another level because of just the absolute kind of freak nature of what his upside potential could be or would be. And so set those two guys aside. I don't think Flagg is a better prospect than Zion was. Now, Zion, it turned out, had his own things. He had to deal with injury issues, some weight issues, so maybe some personal kind of off-the-court stuff that has derailed him a bit. I was wrong about how good Ant and Cade would be. I thought Ant was a good, but not going to be a superstar, and Ant is a superstar. And so I am very interested to see how Flagg looks over these next. He's going to play at least 2 more games, and the odds are he's going to play 4 more games. How he looks, and if he has a dominant tournament moment the way Zion did, the way Anthony Davis did, the way a lot of these guys who were now Anthony Edwards obviously didn't. The guy didn't make the tournament. But a lot of the number one picks who went to college, Paolo had one. A lot of the number one picks who went to college had those kind of signature tournament moments. Cooper hasn't needed one yet, and he's coming off the injury. But I'm very excited to see him in the Final Four against Houston, Tennessee, or Kentucky, and what that looks like. Now, the other story of this tournament so far has been that, no Cinderella. NIL is the death of college basketball. Let's all please pump the brakes just a bit. Just a tiny bit, if we could. Okay? First of all, 1 year is not a trend. This is 1 year where we've had no mid-majors in the Sweet 16. Second of all, are we saying we would feel drastically different if the Queen kid from Maryland hadn't made his buzzer beater and all of a sudden there was a Cinderella or a mid-major in the Sweet 16? That would make us feel like, oh, okay, everything's fine? No, probably not, right? And so I don't really subscribe to the idea that because it happened this year, this is what every tournament's going to look like from here on out, especially because it literally almost didn't happen this year, in that Maryland needed the first buzzer beater of the tournament to keep a mid-major out of the Sweet 16. Now, I'm not a fool, and I do understand that the transfer portal and guys who are really good at smaller schools then transferring to bigger schools, and one of the things mid-majors had going for them was guys sticking around together for 3 or even 4 seasons and growing together, that gave them a chance against the more talented teams. You are going to see less of that. But what I think that could lead to, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, is more of the true deep Cinderellas. Guys that are from single bid conferences, your 14 or 15 seeds, who are not going to get poached because of NIL stuff, coming in and having real Cinderella runs. But even if we have less Cinderella stories in the NCAA tournament, the upside is having a bracket as it stands now, where the games are as follows: 2 versus 6, 4 versus 1, 4 versus 1, 3 versus 10, but the 10 is Arkansas, coached by John Calipari. 2 versus 6, 2 versus 3, 1 versus 5, and 1 versus 4. What that creates, what it should create, is an unbelievable weekend of college basketball. On Friday, the spreads are 3.5, 4.5, 7.5, 8.5. On Thursday, the spreads are 5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 9.5. And we should have 8 games where 6 are super competitive. And I'm good with that. Because people don't... You like the story of the Cinderella, but the actual games, especially once we get Sweet 16 and certainly to the Elite 8, are usually, not always, sometimes Butler makes back-to-back national finals. The games are usually not as good as one would have hoped for because that team is just so outmatched. I don't look at any team this weekend as insanely outmatched. I mean, the biggest underdog is an excellent Arizona team, and that's because they're playing Duke. On Friday, the biggest underdog is a Michigan team that absolutely can beat Auburn. And so I think it was a little too fatalistic saying that college basketball is just in terrible, terrible shape because we're not having Cinderellas, when A, it's 1 year, and B, it is probably going to lead to a more compelling Elite 8 and Sweet 16 than we've had in recent history. And my last NCAA tournament take before we get to the Lakers losing streak in the Western Conference playoff race, some other things, is you can't ever get everything in life. And this is about Dan Hurley and the Connecticut Huskies. So, Dan Hurley is a great coach. I don't think there is a single person in the sports world that thinks anything other than that. Danny Hurley also is intentionally, I think, provocative and kind of wants to play the villain role a bit, or he thinks it either helps him or helps his team, whatever it is. That's fine. What I don't love, and I gave credit to Mark Titus for this yesterday on the TV show, and I will do it again because I think he put it absolutely perfectly, which is he compared Dan Hurley to the wrestler that takes the stage at a show in Wichita and then makes fun of Wichita. It's like, oh, you're a bunch of rednecks, and makes fun of the local teams and does all this stuff in order to catch heat and get boos. Except that wrestler then does not act wounded or like he is being unfairly maligned when he catches heat or gets booed. It's what he's going for. And so having Danny Hurley walk off the court their first time they lose an NCAA tournament game in more than 2 years and blame the refs and then say to the local media after his press conference, thanks to you guys for being fair, the national media Skip Bayless wannabes were not, is to me trying to have it both ways to a degree. You cannot try to play the villain and then get upset when you get treated like a villain. And I also would like to know, who are the national media folks that were what was said that was unfair? Was it that the way you acted in Maui, or was it Maui? I don't even know if it was Maui, the Bahamas, whatever it was, the preseason tournament, where you were a game into the year absolutely losing your mind with the officials, and then your final game of the year blamed the officials when Baylor's trying to take the court? Was criticizing that unfair? Was it the people, and I don't know who these people would be, the people in the national media who do talk college basketball all season, said, this UConn team is not as good as their ranking early in the year, or this UConn team is not a real contender. Those people who were proven 100% correct, was that unfair? What was unfair about it? And I said this on the show, and Wild seemed to not only disagree, but to think I was crazy for saying it. But when you then hear that the UConn sports information director confronts a local journalist who got the video of Danny Hurley yelling, I hope they don't F you like they F'd us, Baylor. I hope they don't F you like they F'd us. The UConn sports information director going to that journalist and saying, if you don't take that down, I'll, quote, ruin your life. I do think that that is because of some of the culture that is set by the head coach. I absolutely think that. And I think that is not great. And so we can hold multiple thoughts in our head at once. He is a great coach. They are an unbelievable program. And he also runs so hot and is so brash in their success and does not seem to handle the little bit of on-the-court adversity that they've had, this latest bit, that well at all, that typically is a cocktail of a lack of likability. And he might not care at all how well liked he is, but UConn fans acting like people are unfair to their coach, or him acting like the media is unfair to him, I think is a little much. And so, listen, unbelievable run by UConn the last 2 years, the previous 2 years, and man, they sure as hell put a scare into Florida. But they did not lose that game because of the officials. They lost that game because from the 7-minute mark to 30 seconds left in the game, they made one basket. They could have won. They stopped hitting shots. And that's not on the officials. When it comes to college basketball and March Mania, one thing is for sure, nothing's for sure. Upsets, buzzer beaters, Cinderella's advancing, top seeds going home early. It all could happen, as it happened in this tournament. Not a lot of Cinderella's advancing and not a lot of top seeds going home early, which should make the next few rounds great. But we did get an unbelievable buzzer beater in one of the last games of the round of 32 for Maryland. It all could happen. Bet the unexpected. Every upset every day with DraftKings Sportsbooks. With live betting, exclusive content, promos, and parlays, DraftKings is the ultimate college basketball destination for March. Ready to make your first bet? Check out the matchups. Pick a team to win. It's that simple. You guys know I've been riding with Tennessee, so I'm going to give you a couple more Tennessee picks. Tennessee laying 4.5 versus Kentucky on Friday is something I like, and Tennessee at plus 215 to win their region, the Midwest. That is something that I like as well. Lines and odds are subject to change. First time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers, bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Bet the unexpected with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use code WRIGHT. That's code WRIGHT for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets. Code WRIGHT to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, so now to the NBA. The Lakers lost again, and it was when you were looking at this schedule for the Lakers, you probably had penciled in, even before you knew LeBron was coming back, but certainly once you heard LeBron was coming back, wins against the Bulls, the suddenly red-hot Bulls, by the way, who won again last night, and the Magic, whose offense is just impossibly bad. The Bulls instead scored 146, and the Magic scored 118. And so what I am concerned about, what I'm not concerned about. What I'm not concerned about is this. It always takes, guys. I think one of the things we in the media do a very poor job, even though we see it time and time again, but one of the things we do a very poor job of recognizing or accounting for is when athletes tell us, man, there is nothing to prepare you to play professional basketball like playing professional basketball, we should believe them. And by that I mean every single one of these great players, when they are coming from an extended layoff, take 2 or 3 games to look like themselves. Luka, his first few games with the Lakers, after being out for a while with injury before and then during the trade, was so rusty. There was a brief, maybe Nico was onto something, renaissance. And then, of course, it went away. Luka got to being Luka. Again, sticking with the Lakers. Austin Reeves, who's not a great player, but a good player. His first few games, back from his injury, he didn't look anything like himself. Then he immediately ripped off the best basketball, the best stretch of his career. So LeBron not playing quite up to LeBron's standards the last couple games is not something to panic about. And here's the other piece of it, and we'll get into this more in a bit. The entire Western Conference, except for Oklahoma City, is on a losing streak. Spots 1 through 9 or 2 through 9 in the standings have lost. The Rockets, again, streak is too much, but have lost their most recent games. The Rockets lost their last game. The Nuggets lost their last game. The Lakers lost 3 in a row. The Grizzlies lost 3 in a row. The Warriors, Clippers, Timberwolves all lost their last game, and the Kings lost 3 in a row. Of those teams, obviously, Houston had won 9 in a row. They were playing great. Golden State had won 8 of 9. They were playing great. And the Clippers had won 8 of 9. They were playing great. And the Timberwolves had won 7 of 9. They were playing really well. But the teams the Lakers are really jockeying for in positioning, Denver and the Grizzlies, they've lost 6 out of 10. The Grizzlies have lost 5 out of 10, which is why the Lakers losing 7 out of 10 has not killed them. And so it has opened up the window potentially for one of those teams, Denver, the Lakers, or the Grizzlies, to drop to the 6 if the Warriors keep winning. But that the Warriors, Steph dealing with his injury, and the Warriors just took a loss, so they cooled off a bit. We'll see how they look in Jimmy's return to Miami. But so standings-wise, this hasn't killed him. So those things I'm not worried about. Here is what is a legitimate concern and what has to be said, and I think JJ has alluded to it, and he's correct. This Lakers team is not good enough defensively to hold anyone under 115 if they are not locked in, dialed, and connected on that end of the court. And the last few games, they have not been that. And so I do not think it is the sky is falling for the Lakers. I do think that I said yesterday on the show that over their next 5, they should expect to go 4-1. The next 5 were Orlando, Indiana, Chicago, Memphis, home for Houston. That was the 5. Well, they just lost the first one. And so 4-0 with one back-to-back at Indiana, at Chicago might be a tall ask, but it's what the expectation should be. At Indiana, after back-to-back bad losses, you must win that game. At Chicago, even though Chicago, again, what has Chicago won? I'm looking at it right now. 8 of 10, I think that is. Yeah, they've won 8 of their last 10. And one of those losses was a heartbreaker to the Rockets. At Chicago, after you just let Chicago and Kobe White embarrass you, you must bounce back and win. At Memphis, with Memphis, we'll see if they're still dealing with all those injuries, a game that I'll be at, actually. That's a game that you absolutely got to find a way to win. And then home for Houston in a game that if you have any chance of catching Houston in the standings, you must win. That'll be the kind of pivot game. But these next 2 games for the Lakers, at Indiana and at Chicago, and Indiana's good. I'm not trying to downplay Indiana, and Indiana is hot right now. I think they've won 5 in a row. Those are games you absolutely unequivocally must win. And I'm really interested to see how the Lakers are able to guard Halliburton, because obviously Kobe White had that monster game against them, 46 or something, and Orlando scoring 118 when Orlando cannot score, and Franz and Paolo combining for 62, it's problematic. So, not panicking, those are a couple bad losses. One of the reasons you don't panic is, again, if we talk about the Western Conference playoff situation, and I alluded to it, a lot of these teams are in, again, Houston is not, and the Warriors are not. But Nuggets, Lakers, Grizzlies, some because of injuries and some just because of like a March malaise, just don't seem to have it all together. On the other hand, the Thunder just keep handling their business. They win basically 9 out of every 10 games they play for almost any sample of the season. It's really like 8.5 out of every 10 games they play. They're on another ho-hum 6-game winning streak with a point differential for the season of 13. That team is excellent. I know, breaking news, the Thunder are excellent. But that team is really something. And you might be like, well, then Nick, why aren't you picking them to win the championship? I'm very interested to see how they can deal with Luka and LeBron in a playoff series. But if the Lakers defense doesn't tighten up, they're not going to get the opportunity to go against them in a playoff series. This episode of What's Right is brought to you by Daya Pizza. featuring dairy-free cheese made with their new Daya Oat Cream Blend. Dairy-free cheese come a long way, and Daya's leading the charge. Their pizzas offer the melt and stretch of traditional cheese without any dairy. Each Daya pizza starts with a perfectly crisp crust, layered with savory, satisfying toppings, and finished with cheese that melts and stretches beautifully. The Daya Oat Cream Blend delivers a creamy, cheesy texture that's indistinguishable from dairy-based options. Every pizza is crafted to be dairy-free, making it a great choice for anyone seeking more inclusive meal options without compromising on taste. Daya takes the concept of dairy-free to a new level, eliminating faux mou. That is not the fear of cows, that is the fear of missing dairy. These pizzas deliver delicious taste and texture, making them perfect for any occasion, from casual dinners to game day spreads. Enjoy a faux mou free pizza night with Daya. Visit DayaFoods.com for more information, or find Daya Pizza at retailers like Whole Foods, Kroger, and Walmart. Coming soon to select Publix and Sprouts. Follow Daya on Instagram and TikTok for more updates and recipes. All right, before we get to the F1 minute, after an awesome race weekend, here is the Aaron Rodgers. Florio floated the idea, because evidently I didn't know this, but McAfee is hosting a live show in Pittsburgh April 8th or 9th. And Florio floated the idea that Rodgers is holding off on signing with the Steelers so he can announce it at McAfee's live show, which would be so perfectly on brand and also just so perfectly outrageous that I almost think it's going to happen. No one has explained to me, because no one can explain to me, anything positive as far as the Steelers' chances of forget winning a championship, breaking their nearly decade-long drought of not winning a playoff game. No one has explained to me how Rodgers waiting like this helps that. And the reason is because they can't. All it does is either feed Rodgers' ego, help Rodgers assert power within the organization, or if he really, really drags this out, give Rodgers the excuse to not be a part of an offseason program. Those are the only benefits that come from this. And none of that is good for Pittsburgh, which is why there is no, like, Rodgers clearly wants to play, and the Steelers are clearly his only real option. So there's no reason for this to be going on, except for the fact that the Steelers don't have the, right now, institutional courage to tell Rodgers, hey man, we need to know by Friday. Every other free agent in the league has been able to make their decision. You obviously want to play. The Vikings aren't interested. The Giants have finally, begrudgingly turned the page at least a bit. You want to come here anyway. Let's just get this done. But I don't think they're going to do that. And I think Rodgers is going to continue to drag this out. And I think we're all, myself included, kind of playing into it. All right, before we get to listener questions, a reminder to like, rate, subscribe, and review. And also a reminder that it is now racing season. So, time now, live from Miami, or plausibly live from Miami, the F1 Minute with Sierra Fadell.
Welcome back to F1 Minute. I'm Sierra Fadell, and I'll be covering the biggest news following the Chinese GP in Shanghai. Now, Oscar Piastri started from pole position for the first time in Formula One history. George Russell was in P2 and Lando Norris in P3. Now, on lap 1, we had some dicey action between the Ferrari boys. Leclerc picked up some front wing damage, and then around lap 4, Fernando Alonso DNF'd again, but not because he crashed into the wall, just because of brake failure. But I feel kind of bad for him because he has yet to follow through an entire race. But in Japan, we're rooting for him. A major talking point of this GP was tire preservation, though. A vast majority of the teams tried their best to maintain tire life, leading up to most of them only making one pit stop over 56 laps. So it wasn't the most thrilling strategy race, but a strategy race nonetheless. In the end, it was another McLaren 1-2 with Piastri taking the dub, securing his third victory in his Formula One career. Lando Norris finished in P2 and then George Russell in P3. Now, the biggest news from this GP came after it already ended, and that is that Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Pierre Gasly were all disqualified from the Chinese GP for failing post-race technical checks. Now, it was a fairly accomplished weekend for Ferrari. They had their first ever sprint win thanks to Lewis Hamilton, but they also had their first ever double disqualification in the same weekend. It's honestly crazy work. Thus, Leclerc and Hamilton have officially earned their place in this week's DRS, aka Disastrous Race Shenanigans, and that's the second time in a row for them. But Leclerc and Gasly were both disqualified for their car being underweight, so basically lighter car equals performance advantage. Hamilton, on the other hand, was disqualified because the thickness of his plank assembly was below the minimum requirement. So lower the car is equals performance advantage. So as you see, once the FIA finds a performance advantage, that means disqualification. So since they all lost their finishing positions, Ocon, Antonelli, Albon, and Behrman each moved up 2 places and picked up some more points on the way. Gasly disqualification from P11 also meant that Nick's guy Sainz and Stroll snuck up into the top 10 to grab some unexpected points for them as well. So that's all I have for the Chinese GP. I'll see you next time for Japan.
Great job as always. Man, I guess I'm a dope. I need to ask Sierra about this off the air. Can they not just do, I'm sure they do a pre-race inspection. This is showing my own ignorance here. Why would a car pass the pre-race inspection and not the post-race? And if they're not doing a pre-race inspection, why are they not? If you're going to end up being disqualified, I don't know. I have to learn more about this. I'm going to ask Sierra. All right, some quick listener questions. Noah says, do you see Dan Hurley as the rich man's Nick Sirianni? Listen, I think that's on the board. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good potential comp. And Sirianni's champion now, too. But Sirianni doesn't seem to think the media treats him unfairly. Our producers say maybe they're changing parts and pit stops. Maybe that's it. Maybe the cars are good pre-race, then during the race there are some shenanigans. Taylor asks, why is Achilles or an ACL sometimes considered a 2-year injuries consistently, but a literal heart attack isn't taking the same understanding? That's about Bronny. I think it's because we look at things that aren't like physical injuries as like binary, like, is he okay? Is he allowed to play again? Okay, then he should be the same. When in reality, it's the time off that I think really hurts these guys at times. Sixness says, what would it take for you to get into hockey? How much skew would you need to see in the Vegas books for betting to be a thing for you during the NHL season? For the sake of my marriage, I don't think I can pick up another sport that I'm into right now. Maybe at some point in life. But I just know so little about hockey. Kansas City didn't have a team. I've never been into it. So it's nothing against the sport. It's very, it'd be very, very tough for me to tell my wife now, by the way, also watching hockey, especially because I've kind of re-fallen in love with baseball thanks to Bobby Witt Jr. and the Royals being legit again. All right, Alex, is there anything the Rockets can do over the last 10 games to make you believe they can win a single round? Yeah, to win a single round for sure, there is stuff they can do. So because the Rockets have a tough-ish schedule, I should say, down the stretch. So the Atlanta, Utah is their next 2, but then it's Phoenix, who's on a 4-game winning streak, Lakers, Utah again, Oklahoma City, Golden State, Clippers, Lakers, Denver. If the Rockets play well during that stretch and hold their positioning, I certainly could see them winning a round. My fear for them is they're going to drop from the 2 to like the 4, and unless they are playing an injured Memphis team, I don't think they could. Again, I think the Rockets have had an unbelievable season. As is, they're going to win around 50 games. But for me to believe in them to win around in the playoffs, they have to show me more. And Scott says, what would it take for Tomlin on the hot seat? They haven't been a true contender since they lost to Jacksonville in 2017. Listen, he just got a contract extension, I think. The Steelers have had 3 coaches in 50 years. I actually think what could be best for the Steelers and for Tomlin would be a fresh start for both of them, but it doesn't. He's obviously an excellent coach. I just don't know that you can. I think if he could have gotten a job like the one Jim Harbaugh got, where the quarterback is taken care of and you build the rest of it up, that might be the best. And he just hasn't been able to figure out the offensive side of the ball post Big Ben or even with Big Ben near the end. All right, Demonte, feel better. Thanks to our great friends at Blue Duck and DraftKings and Day in the Volume and everyone. I will see you guys on Thursday. What's right?